What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Conor McGregor sends a message to Michael Chandler. So if this following story prompts you to blurt out a very loud "just fight already," don't worry, you're not the only one. After months and months of speculation as to if and when Conor McGregor and Chandler will actually fight, once again, we're back to, yeah, maybe they will. After 2023 came and went without the opposing tough coaches fighting, McGregor and Chandler were booked to fight at UFC 303 last month. That booking seemed to muzzle all doubters who didn't think the two would battle. But then, Conor broke his pinky toe and had to pull out of the fight, kicking off yet another wave of cynicism around the matchup. So much so, a gazillion people started telling Chandler to move on. More recently, McGregor proceeded to direct the following comment to Chandler via social media. "I talked to Dana today about our new date. All looking good, 24 for sure." So does any of this actually mean we'll see McGregor and Chandler throw hands this year? Not necessarily. As we've already seen innumerable times, lots could happen and the fight could get shelved. But it's interesting to see Conor proactively telling Chandler this, given that the Notorious One has never really sounded too hyped about fighting Iron Mike. Now, the big question is, if this fight does get booked, what event will host it? Could we be looking at the MSG card in November? Or the last pay-per-view of the year in December? Maybe earlier? What do you think? Will we finally see McGregor versus Chandler? And when? Up next, Belal Muhammad reacts to Sean Strickland beef. Belal Muhammad and Sean Strickland have traded verbal shots many times in the past. So no one should be surprised to hear that Muhammad didn't have any kind things to say about Strickland and his online feud with influencer David Goggins. Muhammad has taken issue with controversial comments Strickland has made in the past, and he's also accused the former middleweight champ of being all bark and no bite. More recently, however, Strickland has been digitally fighting with the former Navy SEAL Goggins, after he claimed that the motivational speaker couldn't make it through a sparring session with him. Goggins agreed to the challenge, provided that Strickland agreed to complete one of Goggins' famed and grueling workout sessions. Well, ahead of Muhammad's July 27th scrap with welterweight champion Leon Edwards, he spoke with the Schmo. When asked to weigh in on the Strickland-Goggins beef, Belal said this.
I mean, I wouldn't call it a beef. That's what Sean is, right? He's a troll. He's like, nobody cares what he says anymore because he doesn't have the belt anymore. So now he's just starting to attack all these other guys, these other people with bigger followers and things like that, just to get attention. I knew what he was from the beginning. He's fake. He's not this tough guy that he says he is, or this crazy guy that he says he is. He's just doing stuff for clout. And I mean, if he's a man, you challenge David Goggins. Do David Goggins' workout. Let's see if you push through. Let's see how big your heart is.
Now, it should be noted that since Muhammad spoke with the Schmo, Strickland walked back some of the comments he's made about Goggins and acknowledged he's just been bored. So maybe we won't see the two sparring or training together after all. Now, let's take a look at Alex Pereira supports Israel Adesanya. Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya will forever be remembered for their epic fight series, which produced two of the most memorable middleweight title fights of this generation. But recently, Poatan acknowledged that he's going to be cheering for his former rival when the last stylebender fights Dricus du Plessis at UFC 305. Before Pereira and Adesanya ever traded shots in the octagon, they competed twice in the kickboxing ring. Pereira won the first fight via decision, and in their second fight, he KO'd the highlight reel striker. That all set the stage for their compelling UFC fights, which saw the stars record respective stoppage wins. But despite all their battles and all the heated words they've exchanged over the years, Pereira will be rooting for Izzy at UFC 305. In the recent YouTube video that went up on Pereira's official channel, the light heavyweight champion said this. "People asked me about Adesanya and du Plessis. I said I don't see Adesanya losing. Just because he said that about me doesn't mean I'll say it back. It's what I think. I don't think he loses this fight. I hope he wins because he has a beautiful story. I think he has to continue his story. He isn't that young anymore. He talked a little about wanting to stop fighting. I think he has that in mind. I think he should continue his plans. I don't think he finished his plans. I don't know. If he had finished his plans, he would have stopped already. So if he's still there, he still has a dream, something to do in the sport still. I'm here supporting him. I already fought him. I'm not going to say he should lose. I'm not mad at him. No grudges. Like I said, if one day it's possible to train with him and exchange knowledge. There's no question that if Adesanya does win the UFC's middleweight title for a third time, it will only further bolster his case as one of the all-time greats at 185. And really, Pereira's comments here shouldn't be too shocking. Although his rivalry with Adesanya is well documented, it always seemed like, for the most part, the tension was about being the best rather than any serious personal issues. Now let's look at Joe Rogan talks about new UFC gloves. The new gloves the UFC recently released have been receiving mixed reviews, to put it mildly. And while Joe Rogan has stopped short of trashing the new gloves, the longtime martial artist does have some ideas on how they can be improved. Earlier this year, the UFC announced fighters were going to be wearing new gloves moving forward, which, in theory, were going to reduce injuries. But so far, not everyone is sold that the design of the gloves is going to do that. Case in point, while talking with Rampage Jackson recently on his podcast, Rogan asked the following question.
The UFC gloves, the way they are right now, why don't they cover the fingers? Why don't you have a glove where you have the padding on the knuckle, but that you just have a layer of leather that goes over the fingers and goes behind the hand like this? That way, even if you do have your hands open, you'll be running into it like this. Oh, I mean covering the tips of the fingers. The tips are still going to be there. The problem is the tips. The problem is the fingertips going into the eyes. Like every time you see a poke, it's like one finger going into the eyeball, you know? But if you have it covered up, at least it would be different. It wouldn't be one poke going straight through. It'd be a layer that's covering, a layer of leather that covers over the tip of the fingers.
Rogan also praised the gloves that renowned striking coach Trevor Whitman has designed. But according to Rogan, the UFC wasn't willing to meet the price Whitman was asking to sell the promotion the gloves. But it's going to be interesting to see if the UFC looks to implement any of the feedback the new gloves have been receiving. Could we see a recall? Okay, now let's look at Kamaru Usman talks about Leon Edwards' fight. The powers of Leon Edwards are likely at an all-time high, and Rocky sits atop the UFC's welterweight division. But recently, his longtime foe, Kamaru Usman, had some advice for the champion ahead of his bout with Belal Muhammad. Edwards is booked to fight Muhammad in the headliner of UFC 304, which is going down on July 27th in Manchester, England. The scrap will mark the first time Edwards has fought since he recorded a decision win over Colby Covington. Well, on account of Usman's run as the welterweight champ and because he fought Edwards 3 times, he was asked to weigh in on the bout during the UFC's latest post-fight show on ESPN. Usman had this advice for Rocky.
I think it's a good fight. I like the confident wave that Leon is carrying now. You know, I think he understands the responsibility of being a champion, how you kind of have to train, the mentality that you kind of have to have. And he showed that in the fight. But it's just a little thing that I would like to see from him is that killer come out. Because if you know you're the top dog, you got to prove it to each and every contender who wants your spot.
Yeah, even Edwards' biggest supporters likely agree with Usman here. While the champion is finally getting the respect that he's due, we're talking about a dude who hasn't been defeated since Usman beat him by decision in 2015. Edwards still isn't one of the UFC's top draws. One common theory as to why that is because Edwards isn't known as a finisher. Aside from his jaw-dropping head kick KO of Usman in 2022, the only finish the 32-year-old has recorded in his last 10 fights came in 2018 against Peter Sabata. There's no question that Edwards is one of the best technical strikers in the solar system, who has very solid wrestling defense. But if he started to put away the opposition on a regular basis, how massive of a star could he be? What are your thoughts? Up next, Rose Namajunas is suspicious about Tracy Cortez weigh-in. Tracy Cortez ultimately had to cut her hair in order to make weight for her scrap with Rose Namajunas on Saturday. And following Thug's win at UFC Denver, she admitted her spidey senses were going off. Cortez was tapped for the headlining spot after Macy Barber was forced to withdraw due to medical issues. After Cortez came in half a pound over the flyweight contest, she ultimately made 126 by cutting off a sizable chunk of her hair. Well, following Rose's impressive decision win over Cortez, she was asked to comment on what went down at Friday's weigh-ins. The former strawweight champ had this to say.
I do feel like, I don't know who is in charge with making sure that the scale that you check your weight on before you get on the official scale, they're supposed to be the same, and they were not the same. And so whoever's in charge of that, I need to talk to, because that was very, to me, was very suspicious, or something didn't feel right as soon as I noticed a discrepancy. And then when they said for her to blow out her air, then it was a half a pound lighter. So I don't know what was going on with that. I don't know how you can blow out half a pound of oxygen. Either way, it's all good. I just wanted to fight, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, this isn't the first time fighters have voiced concerns about discrepancies between the backstage scale and the official scale. Far from it. If Cortez had one, then we probably would be hearing a lot more about what took place at the weigh-ins. Weigh-ins aside, one of the fight's moments that's gone viral was Thug literally punching one of Cortez's eyelashes from her face. Does anyone wonder if Rose made a wish before doing so? Concerns rise for Islam Makhachev after it was revealed in a photo from the 2024 UEFA European Football Championship that the champ could have an injury to his right hand. In the picture, Islam is seen sitting behind Harry Styles and James Corden, but fans noticed that Islam's hand is in a brace around his wrist, which could put his fight against Arman Tsarukyan in jeopardy. One fan commented, "Remember that I reported that Islam versus Arman was in jeopardy. Interesting to see Islam's wrist in the cast." Another fan said, "Bro's got a brace. He's not fighting for a good 3 months." John Jones was charged with 2 misdemeanors stemming from his altercation with the drug testing agents earlier this year. If convicted of both charges, Jones could face jail time that would be less than 1 year total, and up to a $500 fine for the petty misdemeanor and up to $1,000 for the misdemeanor.
Nate Diaz is suing Fanmio for allegedly not paying him what he is owed for his boxing match against Jorge Masvidal. Ariel Helwani revealed today on the MMA Hour that Fanmio is refusing to pay Nate the guaranteed purse of $9 million. Here's what Ariel had to say.
Fanmio and Engel are now reneging on their written and oral promises and guarantees to pay $9 million owing to Diaz because they claim they are going to lose money on the event. In a flurry of desperate calls to Diaz's representatives following the event, Engel despondently groveled that he was going to lose more money than he anticipated on the event if he paid Diaz what he had promised, and that his wife might divorce him because of the financial losses. Engel went so far as to threaten he might have to declare bankruptcy to avoid paying Diaz what he owed. In the months and weeks leading up to the event, Fanmio, Engel, and their representatives intentionally lied to Diaz's representatives about having set aside the money to make the payments and the payments being guaranteed, going so far as to have their lawyer inform Diaz's representatives in writing that the money to pay Diaz was being held in an independent collection account. Unfortunately, Diaz has been given no choice but to now sue Fanmio and Engel to address their blatant breach of contract and fraud.
Top comments. You know Pereira is good when people start calling Yuri a punching bag. Ankalaev breaks silence? Bro has been chirping all week. Looks like Jones relapsed yet again from the series of tweets he deleted. Usman is jealous. Usman is a bitter close to has-been. Doesn't matter how a fighter wins. Bottom line is to get your hand raised. Alex does that almost without fail.